Hello. I'd like to welcome everyone to this webinar today. It's going to be very exciting. My name is Susan Talone, and I'm the Clinical Director for the Society for the Prevention of Teen Suicide. And today, this training is sponsored by the Society, along with partnership with Maureen Underwood Associates and the YMCA of Greater Monmouth County. The funding for this training was provided through Investors Bank, which has been a long-term supporter of Society for the Prevention of Teen Suicide and a big fan of our work, which is to reduce the number of suicides in our community and to increase awareness through the development and promotion of educational training such as this today. Just a few words about what the Society for the Prevention of Teen Suicide is and how we got formed. Two New Jersey fathers who each experienced the devastating loss of a teenage child by suicide. We are dedicated to increasing awareness, saving lives, and reducing the stigma of suicide through specialized training programs and resources that empower teens, parents, and educational leaders with the skills needed to help build a youth life of resiliency. Our core values that define SPTS and its founding board are passionate commitment to the value of life, belief in the effectiveness of evidence-based suicide prevention strategies, and dedication to removing public stigma. We are convicted that accurate information and education about mental health can and does save lives. The Society offers a variety of resources that can be found on our website. Please visit us at www.sptsusa.org. And now, I want to introduce you to your extraordinary presenters today. Maureen Underwood is a licensed clinical social worker who has worked with children in a variety of settings, including specializing in work with children experiencing trauma, grief, and loss. She started support groups for children whose families had cancer in the 1980s and was a staff member at a summer camp for kids with cancer. Heather Church Soto is a licensed clinical social worker. Through her extensive trauma-focused clinical work with children, families, and communities over the last 15 years, she has found that hope can come in many ways during even the most difficult times. For the past 9 years, Heather has worked as the Director of Outreach Services at the YMCA of Greater Monmouth County, previously the Community YMCA. Heather has the privilege of being the Traumatic Loss Coordinator for Monmouth County, and she serves as a state disaster response crisis counselor for both Monmouth and Ocean counties. And last and certainly not least is Marnie Rhoda, who has worked with Maureen for over 15 years now, providing interventions for children, families, and communities who have experienced loss, including families affected by September 11th and Superstorm Sandy. As a professional coach, she has been guiding people through life changes and challenges for the past 12 years. I would now like to turn it over to Marnie and have an amazing webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan, and welcome everybody. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. I have a few housekeeping matters before we get started. First off, the material we cover today applies to all children in all settings. If we happen to say camp, it's the same for childcare and classroom settings everywhere. Next, we love to field your questions as we go. Place your content questions in the Q&A box that you'll see in the bottom there. That makes it easier for us to keep track of them and not miss any of them. We'll be using lots of polls today, and we want to hear from you in the responses to those polls. Also, please feel free to use the chat to give us comments or answer anything that we might be asking you in a poll. When you use the chat feature, be sure you set that drop-down box to say all panelists and attendees. It almost always defaults just to all panelists. That's us, that's great, but we want you, I think everyone who's attending today would love to see your comments too, so do all panelists and attendees. Finally, at the end of today's webinar, I'm going to be posting in that chat a link to a short evaluation. It's just a couple of minutes. We ask that you click on that link and fill your evaluation out before you leave us today. That way we'll have your feedback, which helps us improve and also helps us keep doing what we're doing. Now for our first and second polls. So this first poll really speaks to who you are. Susan told you a little bit about us, and we're curious to know a little bit about you. So people are answering really quickly. Thanks, guys. Go ahead and check in with us where you are today, where you work. If I didn't cover an area or you want to give a shout out to your region, feel free to drop it in the chat. Oh, Wall, New Jersey. Thanks for weighing in, Wall, New Jersey. All right, excellent. I'm going to go ahead and end the polling. Almost everyone has weighed in. And I'll show you guys. So we have the vast majority of people joining us today from Central New Jersey. It looks like we're all Jersey today, unless someone who's from out of state kind of wanted to keep a low profile. So thanks for checking in. I have one more poll for you, also about who you are before we move into our content today. This poll is about what your role is in working with children today. So go ahead and let us know about that. Lots of counselors today. Oh, and if you check other and you want to share what that other category is, we'd love to see. Feel free to put in the chat. Oh, hi from Westfield Y. Prevention specialist and camp director. That's excellent. Thanks. All right, I'm gonna, look here, there are a lot of Ys representing today for sure, Heather. That's very true. Administration manager. Thanks, guys. I'm going to go ahead and finish this poll. You can see that today we have lots of camp counselors. We've got some people in childcare and some camp manager directors too, but we definitely are counselor heavy today. So welcome to everybody. Thank you for joining us. All right. Sorry. There we go. Now we someone from Camp Mason's got their whole camp with them in the webinar too. That's excellent. So if we could have the next slide, and I think Maureen and Heather are going to join us.
Hi, Marnie.
Maureen, you're wearing your mask.
Oh, well, yeah.
Heather's in a mask. Now I feel like I'm putting
I have mine too. And look, Ace has his on, but he doesn't like it. He wants it off.
Oh, Ace wants to take his
Hi,
mask
Ace.
off. Oh, well, you know what, though? We're not all together.
No.
We are really socially distancing, so we don't really have to wear our masks, right?
That's right.
Thank goodness for
Okay, that makes it so much easier. Mine fogs my glasses up, so
that.
good deal.
Excellent.
Good deal.
Well, yeah, so we're not going to wear a mask when we're presenting to you today, but we're not going to ignore the fact that the masks are on the top of all of our minds right now. I think that's just the fact across the nation and the world. Masks are on our mind. And so we wanted to acknowledge that. We know you're thinking about them. And as just one tip that we want to give you, and I'm sure that you've all already started to think of some great ideas about how to manage wearing a mask when you're working with children. But the one tip we have is go ahead and get a photo of yourself and maybe put it on your name tag, hanging maybe below your name there. So when you're wearing a mask and working with children, they can see your face and what you look like. I think it will help them connect with you as you work with them. So putting masks aside now for now, Maureen is going to let you know what our plan for today is.
Okay, thanks, Marnie. Good afternoon to you all. It's really nice to see so many people, and hopefully you're going to walk away with at least one tidbit of information. The way we've planned today, we've been doing a lot of webinars in the last several months around all kinds of issues related to COVID. And one of the things that's become clear to us, and again, this is an evolving concept, as you know, but what's become clear is that everybody talks about this as a new normal. And if you look the word normal up in the dictionary, it means typical or predictable or usual. And truthfully, there's really nothing that's predictable or typical or usual about this. And there may not be for quite some time to come. So when we realized that, we thought that maybe the word that we want to talk about is this is just different. For the kids you're working with who don't know anything else, this is just the way the world is going. Oh, well, we had that summer, where we had to wear those masks and we had to go to online school that year. So it's really just different for them. So we thought that using the word different doesn't confuse it with the sense that it's going to settle very quickly, because as you all know, this is very unpredictable for all of us. We just have no idea when this is going to stabilize again. And we're going to talk about the implications of that in a little bit. But what we want to highlight today, and what we want you all to remember, is that you have the skills to cope with change. Change is with us from the moment we're born. The moment we leave the womb, we're in a changed environment. So we all have a lot of experience with change and difficult times. You know, the metaphor that I kind of like is that, you know, sometimes life feels like a punch in the gut. And I thought about that and I thought, gee, that sounds kind of hard, but I'm sure there are some of you over the last few months who feel like you got punched in the gut and the wind gets knocked out of you, and you get knocked to your knees, and you have to take that deep breath to come back again and get back on your feet. So we know that you have exactly everything you need to get through this. And so what that means in terms of today is we're going to take probably what you already know, and for a lot of you, just review it in the context of COVID. And there may be some things you haven't thought of because we've been spending a lot of time, you know, thinking about the implications of this, as I said. But, you know, I kind of know, you know, as an adult, that even though I really do know a lot of things because I've been around a long time, when I'm taxed or I'm stressed, sometimes I forget the very basic things I know. So there may be some very basic things we review that you're already going to, you can say, oh yeah, I knew that already. So that's hopefully what we're going to do in this webinar. And we're going to talk to you about not just you, but kids, because what we do as adults is very parallel to kids, and you are going to be role models for kids. So how you and kids cope with change, what this could look like in your camp or your childcare settings, some of those creative ways to respond, because I think as you're going to hear us go through, if you don't use your imagination now, you may get stuck. You may get stuck. And then we're going to tie it all up with talking about why your attitude is so critically important. And that's all the stuff we're going to do. Marnie, as you know, is the person who was looking through your registrations. So she's going to tell you some of the things you asked for that we're really not competent to cover.
Great. Yeah, so these are the things that we won't be covering today, but we didn't want to leave them unsaid because we wanted to make sure you knew that we read your registrations and we know that these are things that you're thinking about and concerned about. One of the things that are very similar about all of these things are that they're moving targets. There's a good chance that during the 2 months we have ahead of us of summer, things are going to change about these. There's going to be expansions and contractions happening. Different regions of the state and different regions of the country are going to be looking at these things differently. So they are difficult to cover, and more importantly, we're not experts in these areas. What we can do for you today, and what we will be doing for you today, is we're helping you feel ready for what is ahead, whatever it is. So whatever the ways you have to manage these things, we're here today to help you feel like you can handle it. So as we move towards that, let's talk about what's been different for you in the last several months. So that's a poll. Here we go. So we're launching a poll, and you know, I'm well aware that, and I'm very happy that today we have groups of people all watching together in locations. That's really great. We know the polls don't necessarily work for the whole group. Not everyone can weigh in, but feel free to take a moment, like while I'm talking right now, to have the group vote on some of these things. On these, you can pick multiple options. You can also put things that are different for you in the chat. You know, we do know that we've had a lot of change. Someone did a lot of cleaning. Kudos to you. I feel like I did less cleaning than ever before, but I'm proud of you for cleaning. All right, I'm going to give this another minute so people can weigh in. Anxiety. That's so true. I know I had several moments of anxiety, and some of those moments might have lasted more than a day. I'm going to go ahead and stop the polling and share. So, you know, I think this is so great. I mean, it's just very true. The thing that happened, that life did slow down for a lot of us. And that's a change, just to be clear, that can be good and can be bad. It could be both. And I think that's something to consider about a lot of these changes. They were hard maybe because they were changes, but some of them might have felt better in the long run for us. I'm just going to say, oh, yard work. Oh my goodness, someone was very busy. Yard work, fire pit, 10 yards of mulch got down. Working from home and learning new ways to cope. That's great. Thanks for sharing these, guys. I'm going to stop this one because not only has life changed for us, but life has changed for children too. And what's also going to be different for us is how we know that working with children is going to be different than before. So here's a quick poll on if you've thought of it or you haven't thought of it yet, how is it going to be different now working with children? Learning a new language, people are jumping in right away. So that's very true. New things to talk about. Excellent. If anyone else has any other ideas, you can put them in the chat. Yeah, that's a great point. You know, ways to keep their spirits up when things are different. And I think what's interesting about that is, you know, like we just acknowledged some of those changes, different can be hard, but also the different can sometimes have good things on it. And we have to start looking at that difference as not necessarily always negative. Oh, someone all made banana bread. That sounds nice. I made actual yeast bread because I was overambitious. I'm going to stop sharing the polls here and I'm going to share the results. All right, so here's, you know, and I think this is great to take a look at for a minute. What we know, you know, it is true. There's going to be new rules to enforce. That's going to be one of the other big changes. Not being able to physically comfort them, activities aren't allowed. You know, I think that, you know, we guessed at some of these things because I think we could all expect them. So we've had a lot of changes and things are really different. Maureen, can you say a little bit about what we're going to be able to do with these changes and how to address these with children?
Sure. You know, where I want to start is kind of what makes these changes and the climate under COVID so difficult and challenging and different. I keep looking at that picture and see Justin Bieber staring at me and makes me go to other places. But anyway, you know, first of all, the thing is we've never had an experience like this before. None of us have. And as you all know, experience is a good teacher. We learn from experience. We go through something and we develop those set of coping skills that we kind of file away until the next time we're in a similar situation and we pull them out again. None of us has coping skills to deal with this. And what's happening in the world right now can help us all sort of feel a little bit lost, especially if we know someone who's been sick or if unfortunately someone you knew or someone you cared about died. And I just want to take a second here to pause to say from all of us who have been part of putting this together, we want to send you just the goodness of our hearts to help you through what we know is a challenging time. There are just no words that we can say for how much suffering we know has been out there, and we know some of you may have experienced some of it. The second piece on this slide is about the fact that there's no clear end in sight. You know, we believe this is going to go away. Everybody kind of tells us it's going to go away, but people tell us different times it's going to go away. And you know yourself, when you can anticipate something, you kind of store up your energy to get through to that period of time. So for example, I think about Christmas. I'm going to use an example for kids because I can remember when I was a kid, Christmas was, especially as a little kid, Christmas was a really exciting time. And my birthday was near Christmas and I would just get excited. And I can remember looking at the calendar once Thanksgiving passed and kind of crossing off the days. And as it got closer and closer, it was like, oh, I was so excited because I could anticipate what's going to happen and I could conserve my energy to make it through till it was my birthday and Christmas. Well, no one can accurately predict when this is going to end. So it's like we're in suspended animation. We want to believe it's over. Some people want to believe it's over a little bit too prematurely, and then we slide back a little. So we just don't know what this is going to look like, and it's hard to conserve our energy. We also have lost or changed roles that we had before, and you know your role is your identity. You may have been a teacher, you may have been a parent, you may have been a student, and that kind of went out of place when all of us, our role became shelter-in-place people. We're slowly coming back and emerging into those roles, but they're different than they were before. They're different. What's going to be expected of us, what's going to be expected from the people around us, we can't say. So it's back to that unpredictability and the fact that we are so surrounded by loss. And even though, you know, you often see the numbers, and if you look in the media, you read the papers, the numbers of people who die every day, it's so important for us not to forget that loss is loss is loss. And for some of us, the loss of our identity carries with it as much grief as if it were the loss of someone we cared about who died. For children, think about those kids who lost those developmental milestones, or there's markers in their lives. The kids who lost that special birthday party, or they lost being in the little World Series of their team, or they may be worried they're going to lose their soccer season. And all of that may be weighing on them as heavily as it weighs on us. So it's important to kind of pay attention to what not just we have lost, but what our kids have lost. So Marnie, can you take us through this a little bit?
Absolutely. So, you know, our second topic here from change is loss. And loss is a kind of change that we've all had during this time. Again, some of us have had very large losses. Some of us had what look like smaller losses, but like Maureen said, loss is loss is loss. And it's really important to take a look at your losses and not ignore them, not hide them, not feel like they're not valid because other people have different size losses than you. So go ahead, take a look at this list, and then go ahead and add some things in the chat. And this is where, honestly, you know, if you guys are in a group somewhere, if someone has something that we haven't included in the list, shout it out and have whoever typing for you add it in, because this is a space to really acknowledge the losses that we've all had. I'm going to give you guys another moment to check in. It's, you know, that loss of hobbies and passions is I can see is a lot of people are checking that off right now, which is so true, you know. And then, you know, there's lots of things that we always did that we took for granted that we never thought there would be a day that we couldn't do, that we ended up not being able to do. I'm going to go ahead and end the polling and share the results so we can talk about it. Right behind hobbies and passions were social connections, which was another thing that was lost. We definitely could not connect the way we used to connect. Yep, saying goodbye at the end of the school year, Stephanie, that's a good point. Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, just like Maureen said, you know, people have lost people they knew, grandparents and aunt, family members. I mean, that is a significant loss. Friends, yep. Okay. So with all this loss, this has been a time of loss. With all this loss, it helps us to understand a little bit more about it, more about loss, what we can do with it. So Maureen is going to give us some actual information now that's going to help us manage that.
So as you can see on here, you know, none of these are really losses related to death, but we have that same grief reaction. And when we look at the loss reactions of kids in the age group that we're talking about, it's important to understand them, because sometimes you may see behavior and you may not understand it. And remember, we've all lived in this period of tremendous loss. So you may have some kids who have no visible reaction at all. And what you see from them, and this is particularly boys, I think, but not just limited to boys, there's often may be an edgy or an angry way they deal with things. And you may see this from the minute that they walk in the door. And it kind of gives you a clue that maybe something happened over the past several months where there's been a loss that's been pretty significant. Kids in this age group tend to take it personally as they move into that early adolescence. You know, they are unique in all the world. There's no one who is like them. So how could this loss happen to me? When you look at perspective and look at all the other people who may have even had worse losses. And kids often feel very misunderstood. And the truth be told is sometimes they are misunderstood because they're not straight with feelings. They haven't learned how to talk their feelings. They act their feelings. And so the fact that they're feeling really sad and unhappy may come out in a way that we just as adults don't understand. And then finally, we know that none of us think about death unless it's presented to us. You can't get on with life if you're thinking about death all the time. And that's been one of the challenges of the last several months, is death has been in our face. It's been our faces as adults, and it's in kids' faces as well. And you can't help but think about your own potential mortality. So what do you do about this? Well, again, remember, you're the role model for kids. So we're talking to you first, and then you're going to see the translation of this is really kind of just what you would want. Remember, loss is loss is loss. And it doesn't matter what it is, it's okay. It's okay to be sad, it's okay to grieve. And the important thing is to find someone who understands and share with them. I mean, I had kind of losses on either end. I had a pretty wide range. I had a friend who was very, very sick and was hospitalized, with a brain aneurysm, and I couldn't go visit her. And that was pretty disturbing to me. On the one hand, on the other hand, I had the loss of not being able to go to my favorite grocery store and meander down the aisles. One of the favorite things I like to do, kind of just look at what's there, read labels. You can see how exciting my life is not, and that's exciting for me. But I was lucky to have some good foodie friends who understood that experience and could validate and share with me. The loss of not being able to visit my friend who was so sick and being worried about her health was a little bit harder, both physically and emotionally. And I had to give myself permission to be tired because grief takes your energy away. And so if you look and see, this is exactly the same stuff you're going to do with kids. You're going to begin to think, when you see some of these behaviors, is this related to some kind of loss thing that's gone on? Because that's been the most pervasive element in the last several months. And the truth is, kids in this age don't really need to know about your losses. Younger kids and older kids tend to feel comforted that you've shared a similar loss.
Maureen, I'm sorry. I lost your audio. I'm wondering if someone else could weigh in. Can someone? Yeah. Thank you, Trish. Yeah. It's okay. We're going to have a quick pause while Maureen fixes her audio. Nope. Yep. Take your. We're gonna have a quick pause. Now would be a good time to stretch. Get a drink of water. She'll be with us. I think I hear. Yep. You did it. Good job.
Well, we'll see.
All right.
That's the other challenge about losing your sense of competence. So did you miss anything?
You had just, no, I think we're good. You were just converting from how all the exhaustion of loss can lead to stress. And I think we can pick up right there.
Okay. And the fact that really what you have to do is you have to give kids permission to have their losses. And as that last slide says, which of course my slides don't want to change now, is the fact that you have to recognize that they don't want to hear about your losses. This age group of kids does not want to know that. They are pretty unique. They don't think adults understand them at all. The fact that you have a similar loss, younger kids and older kids take comfort in that. This age group, you want to listen to them. And what happens with loss, it creates stress with us. I mean, that's just what happens. So we're going to give you this very, very simple definition of stress that you can use because this is something that you can even use with kids. And most of the kids in the age group that you're sharing with will have already had this somewhere, probably in health classes. So the deal about loss is stress is that there are no universal stressors. It's our perception that we don't have the capacity to do something. It's beyond our skill. And what happens when we feel that is we go into that very primitive part of our brain that goes fight, flight, or flee. So the example that comes to my mind is watching the kid on the high diving board. And there's the kid on the board who's standing on the edge of that board looking terrified, like, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this. Their brain is flooded with these stress hormones. It's hard for them to use logic and good problem solving that says to them, you've done this before. This is only 5 feet higher than the last jump you made, so you really could do this. So they turn around and walk off the board. Versus the kid who somehow pushes through those emotions and bases that decision on the facts that I know I can make this happen. So stress really can compromise that decision-making ability. And when Heather tells us some examples later, she's going to give you great examples of how to kind of de-escalate kids who are in stressful situations. how COVID might increase youth stress levels. And this is also for us as well. It could increase both parent and kid anxiety levels, especially for those younger kids, parents dropping their kids off at camp or at school and anxious about, are they going to be safe enough? And you know, sometimes when people get anxious, the way they convey their anxiety is through irritation. And they may seem just very irritated at you. So the challenge is, please try not to take it personally. Recognize it's coming from their worries and their fears. Speak to those, listen to them, validate. I can hear you're really worried. I know lots of parents are in your shoes, but and here's what we want to tell you that we're doing to try to address some of what your concerns are. Those schedules have gone out the window, and it may be hard for kids to really start to adapt to them again. Especially those older kids who've gotten used to sleeping late and going to bed late. For this group of kids, you may see some of that destabilizing of their future plans. Kids who are thinking, I can't wait, especially sports activities or other extracurricular things. There may be some kids who, really want to get back in school full time and are worried about not being able to do that. But a lot of kids are worried about not being able to continue to develop in a sport of their choice, and that makes them feel like their whole future is going to be lost. There's often that increased conflict with family members, and kids may bring some of that to you, so that may be the first thing you see in the morning is the residue of something that happened at home. And as we know, even though we as adults think kids know nothing about the economics or finances of a family, kids know about that. They totally know about that. And we've given you some resources at the back of the little manual that we gave you to try to address some of those concrete resources, because we know that there's some families that financially are really struggling right now. So you have to be creative and figure out how to give them the resource, but we gave them for you. And finally, we know that there's a lot of kids who may have had mental health issues or developed mental health issues who haven't been able to get treatment. Most kids get referred for mental health services by school counselors, and there's been a drastic drop in those referrals, both in emergency rooms and in clinic settings since COVID started. So let's have Marnie talk with us now about what you do when you're stressed.
Great. Yeah, so this is our next poll. It's our third topic, stress. What does it look like when you're stressed? Go ahead and weigh in. We guessed some things, put some things in the chat. Let us know. Yeah, it's that those emotions, either angry or emotional, overwhelmed. That seems to be very common in stress behavior. I notice we put can't sleep here, stop eating, or can't stop eating. We put can't sleep. I sometimes have the opposite, sleep. I'm like needing to go to sleep and sleep it all away. Well, someone's giving a great coping strategy for stress. She starts to take long, deep breaths. That's great. Clean or go garden. This group likes to clean. All right, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the polls. Another good coping strategy for stress, counting to 10 or taking a long walk. All right, I'm going to share the results. Good, that worked. Excellent. So I'm going to share the results. We can see here, there's a lot of those emotional responses. People chimed in the chat with some great coping strategies already for stress. The reason we're talking about this is it's important to know your own stress reactions. And when we look at these, it's really not a surprise that children will look the same way when they have stress. When children are stressed, they're going to do a lot of the same things you are. This age group is also going to do things like potentially pick a fight. Most of us don't do that anymore when we're stressed. We know enough to do something else than pick a fight. But these children this age might pick fights, might insult you, might be a little bit extreme in their behavior, making dire threats or threatening to run away. Maureen can take us a little further into stress by showing a great visual reminder of what that can look like.
One of the things, and this is true across the life cycle, But, you know, when we get in trouble, it's because we're overusing one of our strengths. It becomes a liability when we overuse it. And here are some of the things that you might see. And this is kind of overusing at both ends of the continuum. You'll have those kids who get very socially overactive, can't, you know, stop getting close to other kids, or physically overreactive, versus the kids who are so socially withdrawn, it's hard to get them engaged in the group. You have the kids who are those risk takers and inappropriate risk takers. They don't stop to consider the consequences, versus these scared and afraid kids. Those kids who really are so happy to annoy you. It just seems like they live for that. And then you have the other side, the kids who are so eager to please. What can I do for you? Can I help you? Kids who are angry at the world, and then the kids angry at themselves. What you want to try to do is get them closer to that center. You're not trying to move them over to one end or the other, but the center is where the balance is. If you remember that word balance, it will critically help you figure out how to manage some of these stress reactions. And as I said, you know, I think Heather is going to give you some just great suggestions for this. Some of the ones you've already talked about are the ones that we suggest, that deep breathing. And you'll notice that we've highlighted some words in red on this slide. We talk about let's take a few deep breaths together. Let's talk about it. Let's have a drink of water. Those are what we call joining words. And what that does is it makes the kid not isolated. Even that kid who is socially withdrawn, you're in there with them. And when you're in there with them, you become a team. And it's a whole lot easier for them to push you away. And you've only used very, very simple language to do that. You want to look at children. You may not make necessarily eye contact, because some kids, it's too close, it's too much. But just kind of look at them, you know, maybe get down at their level, or in my experience, you look up to their level, especially some of those older kids, with your calm voice, speaking quietly. And what you do is you identify the feeling that they're having. I notice you seem upset right now. You seem to be pretty angry about what's happened. Let's talk about it. So you identify a feeling, speak quietly, don't escalate your voice even if they are, you know this already. And you want to ask them if they can go to a calm place in their head. In your workbooks, the first activity we have for you is how to go to a calm place for yourself. We've used this for years in the programs that we've done with children. We're glad to see that people are using it now for mindfulness, but we were kind of using it in the 1980s, believe it or not. And we give you directions for you, and you can use those very same directions for kids. And then it's changing sensory focus. Let's have a drink of water. We used to be able to say, let's go get a snack. We're not so sure if that can happen anymore. So let's have a drink of water, or let's sit down, or why don't we walk over here? Just changing sensory input changes what's happening in that brain, and you're trying to sort of get that level of stress hormones down. And that's one of the ways you can do that. So at this point, we thought maybe we all should come up for air. Marnie, can you help us do this?
Absolutely. We have already covered change, loss, and stress, so it's a good time to come up for air. One of the things we are hoping that you can take away from today is our concept of coming up for air. Coming up for air isn't the same as taking a break or having a relaxation moment or taking care of yourself or self-care, which is so popular right now. Coming up for air is like what the swimmer is doing right now in our little graphic. It's not getting out of the water. It's staying in the water and just lifting your head for a moment to take a breath. So it's a micro break. Micro breaks like this are especially important because when life is extra challenging, because we need to have those micro breaks coming up for air several times a day. We can't wait for the end of the day sometimes to relax. We need to settle ourselves and come up for air throughout the day several times. We'll take a poll now and give you some suggestions and hear from you about how you like to come up for air. So if you come up for air and you have any of these are the ways you do it, great. If any of these are the ways you want to do it, go ahead and indicate those. Please, look, I just want to point out someone just picked smile and I smiled immediately. Smiling is a great come up for air because just thinking about smiling makes me want to smile. Go ahead and put other ideas in the chat as you go. Oh, take dog for a walk. See, taking a dog for a walk is a great one. It's a little bit of a larger than micro break. And so one of the things we're looking for you to do here is think of the things that you can do in the moment without having to, you can do them while you're at work, you can do them anytime. Focusing on the kids and their activities. That's kind of one of those sensory shifts, making sure you're shifting where your senses are going. Listening to music. Oh, count the length of your breath. That's a great one. Stretch, absolutely. Move your body, stretch. I'm going to end the polling. Thank you guys for sharing these. Here we go. So here's what you guys weighted on. Lots of people like the idea of closing their eyes for a moment and taking a slow, deep breath. We did that today before we started this webinar. We all came from different directions and we took a breath before we started. Getting a drink of water, also a good one. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the results. What I want to say before we move on to the next slide is, my tip here is to have a list handy. It can be a written list, it can be in your phone, but you want to have an arsenal of coming up for air ideas, because in case one of them isn't enough or isn't the right one, you want to be able to go to another one. And if you have a list of them, you can go to them. Also, on those stressful days, maybe you need to put an alarm in your phone and make sure that you come up for air regularly, not just when you're on your last nerve, but maybe before you even get there. So why do we need to do that? Come up for air sometimes? Because those kids, man, we all know there will be days when children are going to get the best of us. And when we make coming up for air a habit, it's going to be easier to manage when things do get a little bit rocky, which is going to bring us to another poll about these kids. So we're staying on the topic of these kids for another minute because we want to make some room to acknowledge that there's some oldies but goodies. There's some things that kids are going to say that might get your goat. Go ahead and weigh in on what you hear kids say. Put some things in the chat. Let us know what you've heard. They're always so quick on this one, Maureen.
I would be quick on this one too.
Yep, you're not my parent. That one's been around since the beginning of time.
Yep.
I'm hungry. But wow, now this, I don't know, I've been thinking this one, Maureen, but why do we have to do that?
Mm-hmm.
I'm too tired. Shut up. That's for sure.
Yes.
Why? You're always picking on me. I don't care. It's not this. There's
Oh, you've got a lot of experience with these kids, I can tell.
Yeah, I agree. This crowd has heard it all. Oh, I like this one. My mom says I don't have to do that.
Oh, yes. That's a good one. Mm-hmm.
All right. Or this is ridiculous. This is great. Who cares? You guys keep chiming in. I'm going to end the polls and share the results so we can take a look at this. Yeah, leave me alone is so big with this age group. You don't understand what it's like to be me. Yeah. So yeah, these are good. So the reason that we're making room, this is not just like a complaining session. The reason we're making room for this is because it's reality. It's part of the picture. It's not the whole picture, but it's a part of it. And we don't want to discount it and we don't want to ignore it. Because when we can take a moment to acknowledge what's really there and what gets to us, there's a good chance that the ones you picked are the ones that really get under your skin, the ones that push your buttons a little bit. And when you know what those are, and you can recognize your reaction happening in the moment, that's that one that really gets to me. It then makes it more gives you the chance to settle yourself so you cannot react. Instead, you can shift your focus to the problem solving with the child and helping the child get from where they are to where you need them to be without having your reaction or your response to it get in the way of that. So Heather is now going to join us, and she's going to provide us with some great structure and strategies about this. What she's got for you guys is a treat. This is something that I could listen to 4 times over. It's so good.
Well, thanks for that. That's exciting. So we're going to talk a little bit about behavior because we know that kids have behaviors. They always have behaviors, and during this whole time, they've probably had behaviors. So we want to talk a little bit about what that looks like. The first part about behaviors, though, is understanding all behaviors have a purpose. So that purpose may be to gain attention, it may be to escape a situation, It might be because of a sensory overload, or it may be just because they don't have a basic need being met. When behaviors happen, it's called escalation. And so we want to go over the 7 stages of escalation, because each of these places has a point where you can intervene and prevent those kids from having a full-out meltdown. So the first stage is the calm stage. And I like to say this is my favorite stage, because this is when the kids are totally compliant and they do the things that you want them to do, and they're having fun and everybody's just enjoying their day. The second stage is the trigger stage. And in this stage, conflict starts to happen where the triggers are coming up and behaviors start. There are 2 different kinds of triggers to be aware of. There's a fast trigger and a slow trigger. Fast triggers happen right before the situation. And that might be something like they wanted to play with an activity and somebody else got there first. A slow trigger, though, is typically something like an underlying condition. And that's something that might make the behavior happen a little bit more frequently or a little bit more often because of something like a sound sensitivity, or maybe an underlying mental health condition like ADHD or anxiety. And so we want to pay attention to also the environmental triggers, especially for all you YMCA camp people that are out there and any other camp people. We want to remember that bugs, sun, heat, all of those things can be triggers for kids. Agitation is the third stage. This is when a person starts to become a little bit more unfocused or upset. They start to exhibit avoidance situations or challenge authority. Trisha just told me bugs are awesome, so that's very true. Bugs are awesome, but not every kid thinks bugs are awesome. So in our agitation stage, we want to talk about that. This is when you're going to start to see that challenge of authority. This is when the kids are going to start to push back a little on you. And once they start to push back, you're likely moving into the acceleration stage, which is our 4th stage. That's when a person can only focus on the conflict, and they typically become very non-compliant at this point. When someone's in the acceleration stage, they most likely have lost all rational thought. And at that point, it's tough to pull them back and have them not move into the 5th stage of peak. Peak is when the person completely loses control. They might be screaming, they might be showing aggression, they might run away. But all of these are things that happen because all their rational thought is gone. And they can only focus on getting whatever this feeling is out of their body, and so the behavior occurs. Slowly, the person can move into the 6th stage, which is de-escalation. And usually this is when they start to have an opportunity to exhaust themselves. They reduce their behaviors, and you start to see things like maybe they start to slow down their breath and they get a little bit closer to normal breathing. Their body starts to be a little less tense. And when that happens, you know you're moving into recovery. So in the 7th stage of recovery, this is the stage where you start to see somebody have some shame or sorrow. They might have fear or regret because of their behaviors. And this is a place where we talk about the behavior and talk about consequences. So we're going to go through some examples of what do we do in each of these stages to help really make sure that we can pull the kids back and intervene so it doesn't hit peak and we have to worry about that. So in the calm stage, what we want to do is we want to establish our expected behaviors. This is when you're putting together the rules. What do you want to see them do during the day or during the activity? In this time, you want to follow the 4-to-1 rule. And the 4-to-1 rule really is giving 4 positive feedbacks for every 1 negative feedback. You want to teach coping skills at this point, like deep breathing. And so one of the things when we talk about deep breathing is we like to do what we call the 4-4-4 method. And that means 4 breaths in, hold it for 4 breaths, 4 counts to breathe out, and then hold it again for 4 breaths. And that gives you the opportunity to kind of reflect on what's going on. You want to practice this with kids so that when you use this skill later on, they have the opportunity to know what they're doing. And this is where we also set the consequences for behaviors. So we want to tell kids up front, if you do X, this is what's going to happen. because when X happens, now you already have the consequence set up. So we move into the intervention for our trigger stage. For a person with a fast trigger, we want to distract them from that trigger and refocus them onto something else. For example, we want to say something like, I know you want to be the first person to try, and it can be really frustrating when you don't get what you want. How about you help me count and figure out how many people were able to do this before it's your turn. And when it's a person with a slow trigger, something like anxiety, we want to reduce the anxiety by saying things like, we're all going to get to take a turn at this activity before we leave the area. Can you be the leader and help me make sure that that person everybody is able to have the chance to do the activity? And then we want to practice our coping skills again. So this is when we're practicing that 4-count breathing. And you can encourage this by saying to the kid, I know you really wanted to do this. Why don't we take a deep breath together and count each person that's been able to do the activity until it's your turn. In the agitation stage, this is where we want to start using broken down directions. You want to say to them what you want to see and not what you don't want them to do. So this is where you say, put the phone down, instead of saying something like, stop using your phone. So your directions are a little bit different because you're telling them what you want them to do. You need to offer acceptable choices for alternative behaviors during this time. And so an example for that might be, you can put the phone in your pocket, or you can put it in your bag. And then you want to set a clear and enforceable limit. And so in this scenario that we're talking about, you'll say, if you don't put the phone away, we will have to take it, and you can get it back at the end of this activity to try again. Remember, it's really important that you stay calm through this whole time and use non-confrontational directions. Your reaction throughout this whole thing can make or break their behavior. Once we hit the acceleration stage, you want to make sure you start to use short phrases. For example, saying, walk please. And then wait a minute and let them respond. Remember, this is when their brain is not working quite as clearly. And so we want to give them time to have that direction process in their brain. Once they complete what you ask them to do, when they start to walk, you want to make sure you praise that by saying something like, great job slowing down your feet and walking. And then you want to remember that you are the role model through all of this. So continue to remain calm. And if you start to escalate, you're likely going to push them into the peak phase. This is when active listening can be a really helpful time. So what is active listening? Active listening is acknowledging the person's feelings without judging them and showing them that you understand. For example, saying, I can tell you're really upset that your team lost that game by 2 points. How about we sit over there and talk about it? In this example, the youth was showing in their body that they were upset. So we named that for them. We gave them an appropriate coping skill by talking about their feelings. And by acknowledging their feeling, the youth will feel more likely to be understood and likely reduce their behaviors. Okay, so here we are. We hit peak, we got here. What do we do now? So safety is most important. When we're in this peak behavior time, you want to make sure that the youth, as well as anyone around them, stays safe. You want to remove all the attention that you can, because attention tends to reinforce the behavior. Remember, this doesn't mean leaving them alone. It means keeping an eye on them without giving the behavior attention. This is a time where you're calling on your nearby staff to help out. This is not a time for consequences. The youth's not in a place to hear the consequences at this point. And so attempting to give a consequence might make the behavior last longer. There's going to be plenty of time to give consequences when we get to the recovery phase. Your tone of voice is super important. Remember to use a calm and quiet voice. Sometimes I tell people this is a point where you whisper, because kids really do want to hear what you have to say. And if you get really quiet, they tend to quiet down so they can hear you. You also want to use physical cues. like using your hands to calm them down. And make sure that your body isn't looming over them. I know sometimes kids are bigger than us, and so they're looming over us, like Maureen was saying. But we want to make sure that we're not standing over them, because that can feel very intimidating. Remember, your actions can increase or decrease the behavior. Stay calm, wait it out. The behavior will slow down. And then we move into de-escalation. This is our cool down period. You need to continue to wait and let them cool down. This is a good time to say things like, I'm happy to see that your body is calming down. How about we take some deep breaths together? And this is, again, not the time to talk about consequences, because their logical brain hasn't come back yet. You want to watch for the behavioral clues, like the normal breathing and the less tense appearances. And then those things will tell you that we're slowly transitioning into the recovery phase. So in recovery, we're finally here. Yes, the behavior has stopped, and now it's time to talk about what happened. It's really important that the first thing that you do is talk about the behavior and not the consequence. So you want to ask them something like, we need to talk about what happened. Can you tell me what happened? And then you want to try to get out the need. What was the behavior for? By saying something like, what were you thinking about at the time? And what have your thoughts been since that? After you do that part, you want to talk to them about, could their behaviors possibly hurt someone else? Ask them a question like, who's been affected by what you did? And in what ways might they have been affected? What do you think we need to do to make things right? Then you want to ask them what they could have done instead of the behavior that they had. What was an acceptable way to share their feelings? And finally, you talk about the consequences. Remember, back in the calm phase, we set the consequences for what behaviors might occur. And it's important to use those consequences at this time. They might not like it, but the consequence needs to occur. Follow through is very important. So we're going to practice this with a couple different scenarios. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about our friend Samantha. Samantha is an 8-year-old who lives with her parents and younger sister. She seems to enjoy the program most days and arrived today with a smile. As you wrap up your third activity, she sits down and refuses to go to the next activity. She tells you she wants to go home and won't move until you let her go. I bet Marnie might have a poll for us about Samantha. Are you there, Marnie?
You know I am. All right. Here's Samantha's poll. So based on the scenario Heather just told you about, what do you notice about Samantha? All right, people are weighing in. If there's anything you notice that's not in the poll, go ahead and put it in the chat. Excellent. I'm going to end the poll and show the results, Heather. Here we go.
Oh, wow. Look at that. A lot of you guys noticed that the behavior happened when she was told she had to go to the next activity. I'm glad that you guys noticed that, because that is one of the things that is a struggle for Samantha. I also like, though, that a lot of you said she showed up with a smile and she showed us that she wanted to go home. You know, so all of the answers of what you put in there were actually right. Notice that her behavior shifts at transition time. She may struggle with transitions, or maybe she doesn't like the activity that you're doing, or maybe she really likes the activity that you're doing and she doesn't want to leave until she finishes it. She might also be struggling with just transition and change in general, and maybe you're just seeing it now because she's been keeping that smile in place. So I have a feeling that since we've done all of this, there's probably some places we could have intervened a little bit earlier. So let's look at a few other places where she shows you some behaviors. At 9 o'clock, after your first activity, you notice that she's dragging behind the group, and you encourage her to stay with the group. During the second activity, you see that she's keeping her to herself and her smile's gone. Marnie's going to share another poll with us to see if there was something maybe we could have done a little earlier to help Samantha before this behavior occurred.
Yep, so here it is, polls launched. Now that you know more information that Heather just told you about, what could you have done before you got to that place where she shut down?
I see that maybe somebody upset her, maybe she feels like she can't do it. Those are great.
All right. Good chunk of people responded. I'm going to give it another 5 seconds, Heather, and then we'll wrap it up.
All right.
Go ahead and keep adding in the chat after you voted if there's something else that feels right for you. And I'm going to wrap it up. Share you the results, Heather. Here you go.
Oh, I like heads up timer. That was great. So yeah, ask her if something's bothering her. When you notice that there was a change in behavior, it's really helpful to ask, what's that about? What's going on? Find a friend to help her get connected. I love that. I think it's great that you want to keep them connected. You know, part of what helps us feel like we're part of something is having connection. And so that's a great idea. I want you guys to know that we could do any of these things to help Samantha at any point in time before that meltdown. And one of the things we want to go through is just what were the triggers and the different stages. So the trigger for Samantha, and Marnie, if you could stop sharing that poll. Thank you. So the trigger for Samantha is that she seemed to be dragging behind the group. And also your response to her might have been a trigger. If depending on how you told her to catch up, that might have been an issue. The agitation stage started when she kept to herself and she wasn't smiling anymore. And the acceleration stage started when she was asked to transition a third time. So interventions, like we talked about, could happen at any point in this. You notice that she's usually a happy kid. And so you could have asked her a question or said something like, I noticed that you're not smiling anymore. What's going on? During her initial trigger, instead of maybe telling her to keep up, you could have dropped back with her and seen what was going on and said, I noticed that you're a little behind. Is everything okay? During the agitation stage, you can talk with her about why she's not playing with her friends and refocus her to maybe a group activity. You can also notice that she struggles with transitions, and giving her warnings might be helpful. Somebody put a heads up timer, and that's exactly what we want to do. We want to say to them, okay, guys, we have about 2 minutes until we're going to transition. And that will help them be prepared for what's coming next. Once her peak behavior occurred, though, you can just sit down with her and wait with her until she's ready to move forward. She's not hurting anyone by sitting on the floor and saying, I'm not moving on. So don't give it too much attention. Engage with the other kids and offer her the time to calm down while keeping your eye on her. So we're going to talk a little bit more about one other scenario, and this is Freddie. He's a little bit of an older kid. Freddie's a 12-year-old who lives with his father, grandmother, and two older brothers. He's new to the program because his family just moved here to live with his grandmother, who has been sick. His father works a lot, so he is rarely home. His older brother drops him off and teases him about being in baby program. Later in the day, he tells you he needs to make a call and walks off. You tell him he can't go, but he doesn't listen, so you chase after him once you make sure the other leader has the other kids. So Marnie, do you have a poll for us about Freddie?
I do. Here we go. Same thing as last time with Samantha, guys. What do you see that might have contributed to Freddie's behavior based on what Heather's told you so far? It's an active group. They're voting away, Heather.
I love that. They seem to have really good ideas too. Oh, I like being told no.
Yep.
Yep.
I think a lot of them have done this job for quite some time. Not the first one on the block here.
I think so too.
Oh, he likes to
be in control. Good.
All right, I'm going to end this poll, show you what we got so far. We got a clear winner.
Oh, wow. Yep, definitely a clear winner with the older brother teasing him. We know that anytime an older brother or older sibling teases you, it can kind of put you on edge. I have 5 brothers, and they can absolutely put me on edge by just one little tease, right? So remember, for Freddie, all behaviors have a purpose. In this case, he walked off in the peak stage because he was feeling out of control. He was distracted by his phone, and we don't know what that's about. We don't know if there's something going on at home that might make him feel like he's being left out because he's the only one at the program, or we don't know if he's trying to connect with old friends because he doesn't have any friends in this group yet. Telling him he can't make the call might set him over into the peak behavior because he's feeling left out, and that phone might be his lifeline. So like before, let's look and see if there's some places where maybe we could have intervened a little bit earlier to help Freddie out. So earlier you noticed that Freddie was sitting by himself because he doesn't know any of the other kids. And you also see that he keeps checking his phone and texting. Marnie's going to share another poll with us just to see if we can talk about what you could have done for Freddie.
Great. So yeah, we're asking you guys to check in now. What could you have done with those behaviors that Heather just mentioned? And again, you guys have great ideas. Share them in the chat. When you share them, it helps somebody else out every time.
Ask him how he's feeling. That's great. Say, let's walk over here and join the group and do a quick game. I like that. Thanks for sharing that. Ask him what he's interested in, talking to him. These are all great ideas.
You know, Heather, I noticed in one of those ideas, the person said let's. They were using those joining words that we know help kids feel connected to us.
Yeah, I think that's excellent.
All right, I'm going to end the poll. Let you guys keep throwing things in chat. Don't stop doing that. I'm going to share the results so we see them.
Yes. So introducing him to some friends might help him get along in the group a little bit better. Certainly it might help him feel a little bit more connected. So, and all of the answers again are correct. We want to pay attention to Freddie's cues, and because his behaviors are telling us what we need to know. His trigger was his brother saying that he was going to baby program. And then he reached the agitation stage when he withdraws from the other kids. Acceleration starts when he starts texting. So during this initial trigger, and you could have asked him to come and join the group. You could have tried to create a group activity where they can get to know each other a little bit. And you might also want to ask him if he wants you to have a conversation with his father about the comment that his brother made and reinforce that it's not okay for his brother to tease him like that. In the agitation stage, you can tell him that he might want to try to play a game. Ask him if there's a game that he played with his friends back home that maybe he would like to play with the kids here. Maybe he can teach them something new they haven't played before. And we want to also encourage the other kids to ask him to play. When he starts texting during the acceleration phase, you can ask him if everything's okay or if there's something going on that he wants to talk about. Like we talked about before, he might be using the phone to connect to other friends, or he might be worried because something's going on at home. And asking him about it might reduce the behavior because he might be able to tell you why he needs to make that phone call. And then you might be okay with him making it. So we want to do these things to reduce those behaviors. And if we do that, he might not walk off later. So that was a lot. I feel like I need to come up for my air after all of that. Maureen, what do you think?
You know, I just think that you did such a great job, Heather, of putting it all together. You know, I think that sometimes you're not going to know the reason for behaviors. You just have to deal with what you have. And I think you laid out a very nice template for all of us, you know, not just for our work, but for our real life of how to deal with people, not just children. So I just think that that was so very helpful. So thank you so much. What I want to say, just listening to you all and the examples you had in the chat, as Marnie has said, it's pretty clear. I think that you all have done this for a long time and you're coming into this year with a lot of skills. You know, because it's different,
doesn't mean you forget everything that you've known before. And that's the important thing to remember. The triggers may be different for some of the behaviors, but the behaviors and their management is always, always the same. You're always dealing with the feelings, not the triggering event that created them. And the integrating that you all have done, just in seeing your answers to those polls, which is why we put them in there, because it really gives us a clue, you know, where our audience is. It's really clear you've been around kids a long time, you know what you're talking about, and you do have a sense of how to integrate this together. And those of you who may not, it's always so important to remember that the administration or the administrators, wherever you are, somebody's got your back. You're not out there all alone. Absolutely not out there all alone. You know, even though that's kind of become a bit of a cliche right now, you know, we talk about you're not alone all the time. This is one instance where it truly is real. You've got people who've got your back and want you to succeed. So if you come up with some of these challenges, and you could, because sometimes kids are very challenging, go to somebody else and get some consultation. You also know how to deal with change, as we started our program talking about that. And we also talked about the fact that sometimes we all have a bad day. Sometimes we have a bad week. And when all else fails, Marnie is going to kind of give you a little idea of what.
Absolutely. So when all else fails, here's our takeaways on things you can remember to do. The first is find your battle buddy, not someone to battle, but someone that you want to have on your team next to you when you're having a battle. So when you have your battle buddy, that's the person that you just, you know, that kind of person that you don't need to like say a lot. You don't need to tell them you're having a bad day or it's kind of going bad for you that day. You just have to give them a quick look or maybe have a quick code word with them that tells them that you need them to like give you that extra support, or they just need to validate for you that you're having a bad day. Maureen, do you have an idea of what a code word might be?
Oh, see, I mean, I just always think of hospitals where they talk about code blue. And the minute you hear code blue, all you have to do is watch one of those TV shows. Everybody goes off running. So come up with whatever that word is.
Right. So it's good to have that. And it's someone, you know, it's someone that, and sometimes that person doesn't need to do anything. You know, you just kind of like mouth code blue and they just like are like shake their head and they've got your back. That's sometimes all you need. This next one is another plug for your workbook. I know that you probably are managing a lot right now. Camp is starting soon. I know we're down to the wire, but please do take the time. We put some time and thought into putting that workbook together for you. And some of the stuff that's in the workbook is really useful to have now and later. But this calm plays exercise is quick. It's easy. Once you have it for yourself. And you can teach it to your kids. It's something that you can do in a quiet moment to tell them something, to walk through the activity with them, and you're giving them a gift that they'll take with them for the rest of their life and use. So that's another plug for that. The next one, you know, it's got to be said. It's okay when you're grateful that you go home at the end of the day without these kids. That's totally allowed to feel that way. Acknowledge the feeling. It's okay. I mean, some days maybe you'll wish you could take one of them home with you. And some days you're really glad that everyone picks them up and you get to go your separate way. Heather talking about deep breaths, super important. I want to distinguish here the difference between a sigh, which is not very relaxing, and a deep breath. Maureen, I think you have a sigh for us. It's so good. So that might feel good in the moment. Here's how it doesn't help you relax, because it's all exhale and no inhale. And you're missing the relaxation part of that. You notice whenever someone tells you to take a deep breath, it starts with the inhale. That pause and then the inhale is what actually helps the relaxation happen. So sighing might look like a deep breath, but it actually can cause more stress, not less. So deep breaths, the way Heather told you today, are a great way to start. So go ahead and breathe. And finally, we want you to remember that whatever's going on, the problem, the moment, the bad day, it's going to end. The next one will probably be much better. You know, sometimes, you know, people say the minutes are long, but the weeks fly by. Maureen, what do you have to say about that?
And these may sound like, oh, these cheesy things you hear all the time, but the truth is, the reason you hear them all the time is they work. I think that we complicate life a lot more than we have to. And especially in a time like now when it is very complicated, we have to figure out how to simplify it. And the point of this, I think, is that when all this chaos is going on outside of us, the place we need to look is at ourselves. And it's really important to recognize our skills. I know that sometimes people think they're being vain to say, I really can do a good job working with kids. But I have to tell you, you have to acknowledge that you can. You wouldn't come back and do this summer after summer if you weren't good and you didn't get some pleasure at it. So I think that whole idea of looking at yourself and recognizing your accomplishments, patting yourself on the back. It's what you do with kids all the time, but we do it so infrequently with ourselves. And again, remember, we're role models. So to be able to say, hey, wow, I'm proud of myself for that is really, really important. And Marnie's going to kind of review some of what else we know about you.
I am, and I'm going to take a moment. You don't have to switch the slide back, Marie, but I'm going to take a moment to highlight that role model. Well, thank you. I want to take a moment to highlight that role model thing, because one of the things, not only are you a role model in role modeling your own confidence and belief in yourself, but especially now during COVID, you're the role model, which is to say you set the tone for how the campers are going to look at the situation, the safety. If you bring in a lot of concern and fear and worry, that you're modeling that for the kids. If you go in there with the idea that, I don't know exactly what this is going to look like this year, which is true. Probably you don't know what it's going to look like. I don't know what it's going to look like, but I know that however it looks, I can handle it, and we've got this. That's what and I think that the message we want to convey to children is we don't know we can't tell them exactly what it's going to look like. We can't give them the exact blueprint, but we can convey the message that we can get through it, whatever it's going to be. Mm-hmm. Which brings me to this idea of strengths and challenges. So knowing your own strength and your own challenges is a really critical part of being able to navigate life's bumps and bruises. We've guessed at some of these for you. I recommend that you think about them and think about your own strengths. I think that many of you are good leaders. Many of you are able to be patient and flexible, think on your feet. You like kids, hopefully in this job. People always wanted you to watch their kids, and you like to have fun. One of the benefits that a lot of people find about working with kids is it helps them remember their kid, and it helps you remember to be fun. It's very different spending the day with kids versus spending the day with adults. Lots of adults miss out on the fun for big chunks of their day. Those challenges are probably things that feel right for you right now. A lot of us are worried about COVID. We're worried about COVID for us. We're worried about COVID for the community, what it might look like. So go ahead and look at your strengths and challenges personally, see what fits for you. One strength I want to remind everyone that we all have developed recently is our ability to move forward, make plans, and enjoy our days, even in the midst of uncertainty. Because it's not just that we don't know what camp's going to look like this year. We don't know what anything's going to look like this year. That we're in a state of uncertainty. And at first, we all kind of paused. I think we called it maybe back in March. I forget, it was a while ago now, but I think it was even called like the Great Pause. And for a little bit of time, I think most of us felt like we were on pause. And then we thought, well, I can't just pause forever. And we started to figure out how to make plans and move forward, even though we didn't have all the details worked out. And that's a strength. And it's a strength that we're going to now use going forward. We learned it before. We learned it during that shelter in place. And now as we move forward, we're going to use it. And to do that, we have to believe that we're going to be able to shift as things shift. And I know you can think of at least one way that you've shifted in the past several months. You zigged, zagged. You used to do things one way. Now you do them another. Once you remember that and know you can do it, you can keep doing it, which brings us to our final poll. All right. So this is our final poll. It's to highlight why you do what you do and why, and this is so important to hear, you're the right person for this job. Go ahead, weigh in on chat too. Maureen, most everyone is saying they like working with kids, so.
It's a good sign.
we have the right audience here. Oh, what a beautiful comment. You can learn a lot from kids. Very true. I'm going to let you keep weighing in for another minute or so. I love watching them learn and grow. That's so true. And I want to point out here that we are a couple minutes ahead of schedule. So if you have any burning questions, or not even burning questions, anything you're curious about, feel free. You can put them in the chat or the Q&A at this point, but we'd love to address anything you want to know about before we wrap up today. Oh, there's so many good things going on here. Kids, someone wrote, kids are hilarious. I think the word hilarious is hilarious, so I love that one. Perspective of what's important in life and how you play a role. Even though I'm still young, they keep me young and positive. You want to keep that. There's a sense of accomplishment that comes with knowing you have helped shape a child's future for the better. That's beautiful. I'm going to end the polling. You guys keep weighing in. These are great. All right. So that's what it looked like today. There's lots of really strong reasons why you guys do what you do and why you're good at what you do. Oh, watching them imitate my good behaviors. Yes. Being a role model, that's what being a role model is all about, right? Also, as a parent of older children now, children who are not even children anymore, I will say also watching them imitate your not so good behaviors. Both ways happen. It comes back to get you for sure. Okay. So I think, Maureen, I think you can move us on to this next slide here. But again, as I'm wrapping up with you guys, feel free to throw any questions you have for us up there. We're here for you. I do have two last things here. We are developing a follow-up to this training and many other things in the upcoming months. You know, COVID, we're really watching how people are responding and what people need and developing things as we go. This one is going to have activities for children that are designed to enhance teamwork and resiliency, problem solving. More on that to come. You haven't heard the last from us. Be on the lookout for what we have to say. I'm about to drop into the chat the evaluation link. So in a moment, feel free to click on the link and do the evaluation. There we go. I did that successfully.
And I will say to you, we really, really appreciate you doing the evaluations because that's how we get funding to do these programs. So please, please take a few minutes to tell us what you think. And Marnie, if you could close the poll, because this is my favorite picture.
Oh, I cannot believe I left the poll up during your favorite picture. Oh, see.
This is camp to me.
So what I do want to say here is go ahead and do the poll. I'm also going to send you an email out in case you can't do it right now. I'll send you an email. If you didn't do it now, do it later. You know, to wrap us up, I want to share one of the comments that I saw more than once in your evaluations. And again, your evaluations were so full of thoughtful concerns that you were bringing to this summer and working with kids. But more than once, someone wrote, "Here's to a fun and safe summer experience for everyone." We wholeheartedly agree with that. That's what we wish for you. And we appreciate you coming today to the end of trying to get there. So thank you very much for joining us.
Have a great summer.
Bye. Have a great summer.
All right.